Right, so I think I'm going to kick off because we've got a lot to pack in. But firstly, I just want to say hello and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Emily Burks, a Customer Success Manager here at Appraisd, and I'm thrilled to introduce our topic, talent management, how to get it right. And I'm even more excited to welcome our three fantastic panelists who will share their insights and expertise on this important subject. Roly Walter, our brilliant CEO and founder of Appraisd, will be leading our panel discussion today. And he is joined by Laura Whitehead, who has over 20 years experience working across top-tier financial service institutions, predominantly in their early career, leadership and talent and development functions. Laura founded Tresillian Leadership to support individuals and organizations in managing critical transition points, from individual career challenges to developing new internal talent processes to best develop staff and future leaders. We're also joined by Brendan Mare, who started his HR and talent career in the early careers world, where he worked with a variety of employers across multiple industries, where he was able to work with employers in helping to attract the very best talent. He has spent the past 10 years with Menzies, where he has helped cement and develop the in-house talent acquisition team, and currently is a senior HR VP working closely with key areas of the business across the full HR life cycle. And lastly, Marc Earnshaw. Marc's work in talent learning and organizational development over the past 20 years has impacted thousands of people at global organizations. Marc's direct experience leading teams through awkward performance management processes led him to building a career in talent and learning for international businesses. Marc now shares his experience with clients via his own people and performance development consultancy, People Dev. Thank you all for being here today. We're thrilled to have you join us as we delve into our topic, talent management, how to get it right. So to kick things off, I'd like to hand it over to Marc, who will introduce us to the topic and set the stage for our discussion.
Thanks, Emily, and welcome everybody. I was delighted when Roly and the team asked me to join this session and to do this sort of bit of work for them as well. Having known them for 8 years or so now, it's lovely to be able to do some work like this with them. So firstly, what do we mean by talent management and succession planning? I think with talent management, it's fundamentally about having the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. Now, obviously, CIPD have a slightly longer definition of that, but I think that captures it sort of quite succinctly. Succession planning goes hand in hand with this, and this is a more sort of proactive process to make sure that you've got suitable candidates ready for key positions when they become available. So why do any of this? I think in short, it's around boosting employee engagement and development, making sure they understand that there's a clear pathway for growth, improving morale and boosting retention as well. It also drives continuity, aligning people with organizational goals and helping to create this kind of resilient culture that we want in our organizations as well. And it also reduces risk and minimizes the potential impact of any disruption during key people changes. So what else, what came out of the sort of a bit of research and discussions that I had with different people, including some of the Appraisd customers. Firstly, there's a lot about the whole sort of theory side of it all, and a lot of focus and debate around the best way to identify talent. Should we be using boxes? And if so, how many? What does potential mean? Is this all too subjective? Should we be doing skills-based? Should we have a skills-based approach to this? Which is all, really interesting, but I think key point, we just need to be careful that debate doesn't get in the way of action, because ultimately the consensus was that the focus should really be on developing people and mitigating some of those risks, taking action rather than just identifying talent. Secondly, I think the other thing that came through was that despite all of the change and all of the time and effort that has been spent on this sort of subject over the years, Gartner's findings highlight that actually the sort of top 3 things for HR leaders are around leader and manager effectiveness, org design and change management, and employee experience. And they really haven't changed very much over the years. And then thirdly, the 9-box grid or variants of it still remains a very commonly used tool. And that's despite some of the criticism that gets leveled at it around it being static or focusing on putting people in boxes and categorizing them. It's biased, it's subjective, all these kinds of things. But there are specific things that you can do to mitigate and overcome some of those criticisms. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a tool to help you achieve whatever outcome you're striving towards. It's not the goal itself. I think, in summary, the focus should be on how we support and develop people after the identification part. And if 9 boxes works for you, then great. If you want to use 4 boxes, great. If you want to use performance as a gateway to even get to discussing talents, then great. I think it's very context specific and finding what works for you, regardless of whether or not how many boxes there are, circles, spheres, etc. Let's just make sure that what happens after that actually addresses the problem that we're setting out to solve. And I'll hand back.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Marc. Okay, so some really interesting findings there. And from our point of view at Appraisd, so we've obviously on this call, it's mainly our customers here. So you should all be aware of this already. If you're not, please do talk to your account managers. But we've got a fairly sophisticated 9-box, 4-box, 24-box grid system that you can use. So as a tool, it's very flexible. So you can really kind of make it work for you. And Marc, as he said, and Emma has put this in the chat, actually, sorry, that Marc's created these guides for people in HR or talent positions that are thinking about doing this for the first time and maybe not quite sure where to start, how it's going to go, or what they need to watch out for. So Marc has provided those guides, and we've added them in the links section as well, under apps in Livestorm here, but you'll also get them over email later. But one of the things that, Marc, you and I were talking about when we spoke previously during your research phase was just about, you'd spoken to some of our customers, and I've also obviously been talking to potential new customers as well. And one thing that I've really noticed is that I think in the past this was seen as a sort of an enterprise sort of activity that you might only do if you had thousands of employees, or you might do it, that you might need a process if you had, thousands of employees, but kind of smaller organizations, maybe it was less relevant. But actually, that is really not what I've found at all. And we're seeing companies of all sizes, from sort of 30 people upwards, saying, okay, and we also want to manage our kind of talent pipeline. We want to make sure that we are framing these discussions in a way that's understood across the business, and that we're kind of making sure that we've got succession plans in place, and so on, so that we know that we've got a really kind of fair system that's being applied to everybody. It's going to help us all kind of move forward. So that was one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting from your findings. That's certainly what we're trying to do here at Appraisd, is take some of these kind of enterprise level things and bring them to all sizes of organization. So thanks very much. And I think we'll come back to you, because I know you, as well as doing the research, you've also got a lot of interesting anecdotes to say about your own experience of implementing this as well. But maybe at this point we'll switch to you, Brendan, if it's all right, because when we chatted earlier, I think, you might have a slightly, let me just ask you straight off, what's your view of the talent management process, and in particular, the 9-box grid that I know, a lot of people talk about and wonder if there's still a place for it. What's your view?
Thanks, Riley. I mean, in sort of 2 parts there. I mean, talent management for, I suppose, our business and our industry is exceptionally vital and important. I mean, the sort of talent the talent market is extremely tight within professional services, accounting, finance, and things like that. So, in order to kind of look at the next generation of leaders, and we work on a partnership model. So the partners started off as trainees, as graduates, as school leavers, all back in the day, and they sort of gone through this sort of career steps and the different sort of structure over the years. So, the 9-box grid, I think, has been quite revolutionary for our business, really. So we only introduced it probably about 2 years ago once we brought Appraisd on board. And it's really helped us structure those conversations and really helped to, I suppose, kind of streamline our appraisal process through Appraisd and the different sort of process going on there. But yeah, I think personally, I've always been a fan of the 9-box grid. I think it adds a lot of value. I think that's where you can have the good quality conversations.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you, what was it when you started doing this process or started doing the 9-box grid? What was what was it that you were really hoping to get out of it? How did you kind of sell the process in?
I think for the partners, they really wanted to see the value that it could bring to the organization, because beforehand, how were we sort of rating our sort of individuals and our sort of staff? So, the 9-box grid kind of helped put it into context in terms of where the potential is, where people, because we have a lot of high performing individuals that are not always going to reach the very top of the career ladder. And that's okay, because we need different kinds of professionals at different places throughout the entire organization. So we needed to manage their career expectations properly. And the 9-box grid was really well suited to help us structure a lot of those conversations and manage career expectations as well. So far, so good.
Okay. And one of the things I think that's possibly unique, I don't know, but is just that you are very transparent about the 9-box grid process and each individual's place on it.
Yes.
So how does that go?
Well, it was scary at first for the partners within the organization to really understand the value of being transparent, because I think, the way that us as an HR function kind of pitched it to the business was that, you've got the one hand, you've got the people management view, so how they're sort of rating their people, where do they fit within their grid. But then those people managers were having they were part of the same decision-making process by the people that they were managing. So they were already aware of the 9-box grid. It was more the sort of junior ranks that kind of needed to get used to it. But they are going to be people managers of the future. So we need to buy them into the process and really, I suppose, buy into why it is the right method of talent management in order to manage those expectations. So we went on a huge education piece, really. So big road shows, sitting in front of staff, doing webinars like this as well. And I can tell you, it wasn't plain sailing. There was a lot of pushback, especially when you have those sort of appraisal meetings and, the people managers are saying to their individuals, this is where you are currently in the 9-box grid. But doing the message is one thing, but it's articulating why they're in a particular kind of segment of the 9-box grid, which is really important. Because where we sort of place people in the 9-box grid is moderated by at least 2 other layers before it even gets to conversation. So there's been a lot of careful thought, the reasoning behind that, and it's the responsibility. And we empower those people managers with the information to say, this is where you are right now. This is where we'd like you to be. And this is how we think you can get there.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just ask Brendan a question as well, actually? Did you find that you had most pushback from the sort of the managers, and that the individuals were actually really open to it, or did you not see much of a difference?
I think people managers were quite scared of the potential conflict that could come out of, saying, hey, I think you are in the left-hand column for underperforming. And they were scared that the people were going to sort of argue against that, which is strange though, because the kind of conversations that we empower our people to have with our clients is about having challenging conversations. But when they sort of have it with their own people, they tend to kind of take a step back sometimes. But the way that we have helped them kind of get over that is really to sort of arm them with how they need to deliver the message. In terms of pushback from the actual staff population, it's been quite minimal. Don't get me wrong, there have been some sort of challenging, and before we sort of get to that, some moderations have sort of happened before those kind of things. But it's our responsibility as HR professionals to challenge the business to say, well, if we're not setting this person up in the right way, we want them to succeed, you're potentially going to put them in a position where they're going to fail and may go down a performance improvement route. We want to avoid that, obviously. So let's be honest, let's be transparent about it, and let's help them in terms of where they are right now and where we need them to get to. And I think that's actually helped our business manage performance better over the last 2 years. So overall sort of performance management techniques where people managers feel empowered and they actually want to do it. And it's nice to see that enthusiasm and that appetite. Sometimes it's not pleasant conversations because we've had sort of pips and kind of things like that, but that's not a bad thing because we've managed to lift some people out of bad or poor performance into satisfactory performance. It doesn't always work out like that, but in a very highly competitive industry where our people charge their time, you have to be effective in terms of what you do and delivering the very best service and solutions to the clients. So I think it's been great. It's been, I've really enjoyed to see how the business has grown over the last 2 years, kind of living these practices. And that's been a delight.
Amazing. Okay, well, we'll come back to you, I'm sure. But Laura, let's hear from you because I think you implemented this in the banking sector, right? In a very, very kind of fast-moving environment where people tend, I think in the particular area that you worked, people are often not shy with feedback and views. But I think you implemented this in a different way. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think this probably builds a little bit on Marc's research around, we actually experimented with rejigging the 9-box. There was a general sense that it's been around for a long time. I think we can probably all agree there was a matter of blaming the tool, not the workman, but we attempted to meet the need of the audience with a rejigged, ended up being a 5-box. But what was interesting was that you still found the behaviors slipping in around kind of assumptions and bias around the process, regardless of whether it was 9 or 5. We'd implemented a system whereby we would have a few people identified in a number of boxes for very specific targeted interventions. Most people would then be just sitting in a central box, recognizing that managers would be, working effectively for them, and then a box for development. So we're still ultimately identifying people within we need to give them more time, or they're okay and they're doing well. But the challenge came down to the fact that actually ultimately managers still had a discomfort, even when we simplified it, in boxing people, and a comfort actually in the idea that people can move around. And I think that's one of the key things that I would draw out, is that there's often a lot of fear around putting someone in a box. Automatically people start to feel a bit boxed in themselves in that decision. And we just found actually you needed to really build comfort and psychological safety with the idea that the box was not the final position for someone forever. And that just meant how they were performing right now. And actually, in some cases, someone would be one of your top superstars in your team, but they've just been promoted and they've just taken on a bigger remit. And as a result, they're not actually going to be your top performer at the moment because they're learning something new and they're stretching and they're growing. And so building that psychological safety became the sort of the key piece. It was actually not around building understanding of the new tool. We were back to the process around the tool versus the tool itself.
Got it. So that's presumably a lot of communication, repeated communication, and talking about it a lot.
I think it's communication, but I think it's also trusting to the process. So to Brendan's point, this isn't going to something that people are going to get comfortable with overnight. It's going to be a 1, 2, 3 year process with the same managers, hopefully, to build their comfort and their space within that. But it takes time. And if you have churn, it can obviously, you're almost starting again each year, depending on the tool.
Okay. And what about the managers who went through this process? So who, perhaps had never done it before, never been asked to do this. Did you find that did they come to find the tool useful in terms of being maybe more objective and getting more perspective, perhaps, on the people in their teams and thinking about them in certain ways, so which might then unlock ways to help that person?
operated with Ninebox over a number of industries and businesses, and what you always see is the soft influence of an exercise like this, even if you don't get the perfect end outcome. Just by making your manager sit down and take time to actually look at who they have, and give even just a nominal amount of attention to how someone is performing and what their potential might be, has other knock-on aspects to how they consider who they've got when it comes to thinking about nominations of development programs, when it comes to thinking about new opportunities. So there's always value in the exercise, even if you might not hit that, nirvana of the end state of everybody being in the right box and being identified for all the perfect things. Awareness raising, particularly in industries where people are actually so busy and so time pressed, people leadership gets pushed to the side of the desk. It's always useful just to remind people who they have and all the talents that they bring.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And what about, did you find any trouble with sort of exceptions? I think when we spoke last year, we talked about the rainmakers, or, people who don't fit into the boxes.
Yeah, and I'm interested to Brendan's point around, they are, you've got these people and they have a job to do and they really need to kind of, produce for their business. And I think that's something that you definitely run up against within different industries, is this idea of how do you put some of your people in a box? And how do you recognize the fact that actually, leaving aside discussions we'd probably have to have around key man risk, they do have some people in some roles that are ticking along, that have been doing them for a long time, that are specialists, and actually they might, they are high potential in their field and they're high performing in what they do, but they're not necessarily your future leader. They're not necessarily the person you're going to push through. So there's work that we've done in the past was around how do we recognize those people and give them growth without necessarily saying they're going to be the CEO someday, but we need them in our business and we need to keep them reflected as such. I'd also reflect on the fact that I think for a lot of organizations, the challenge is how their talent overlaps with remuneration and regulated environments. If you are giving someone, if you are rewarding someone for the work that they've done, where does this feed in? Are we saying that actually if there's someone is moving around the grid, are you going to get challenged on the bonus that you're giving them at the end of the year? I'm not saying that's right, but I think often organizations merge all this information together. And sometimes we need to separate talent and what we're doing with our people from how we're rewarding them. But managers have fear of those two overlapping. So building trust through that continued conversation and that iterative process with them, that by saying someone needs a bit of help, that doesn't mean you can't reward them. That doesn't mean you can't use REM to retain them, which fundamentally in a lot of revenue roles is what does happen.
Yeah. Okay. Marc, I was just going to ask you, if you did any work on the kind of relationship between Ninebox Grid or other kind of talent metrics and pay, and how you get the communications right on it, and so that people don't have that kind of fear of unintended consequences when they're giving ratings and things like that.
Yeah, I think it connects to the wider kind of piece of the puzzle, and links back to some of the points made around transparency as well, because I've certainly found that people, especially some of the more junior staff, want this kind of transparency. They want to be able to see what the organization thinks of them, where they're at on a scale, be that a rating or some really accurate kind of descriptors, and then what that means for them and their development, so that they can see a path through, and the connected piece around what that might mean from a pay and remuneration perspective as well. Yeah. But I was going to share one kind of really, I guess, tactical example of where I've seen this in action, and it goes back a few years, but we'd grown a lot as an organisation at the time, and we'd been through this kind of exercise, and we'd been able to identify, using Appraisd, who was sort of potentially ready for the next role, who the high performers were, and that, as the organisation had reached a size where you didn't know who everybody was anymore. Used to know, you could kind of almost look across the desks, the office, virtually at least, and see where everybody was, and you kind of knew everybody. But as we'd grown, we'd lost that kind of line of sight. And so as we expanded into new regions, we had this kind of data to hand to say, well, we know these people are ready for a move to this level. We also know a bit about their aspirations and geographic mobility and so on as well. So being able to connect all of that and then see what opportunities we could potentially sort of proactively approach people about internally to support our growth was one just sort of very tactical example of where it came in very, very useful.
Yep. Okay, cool. And by the way, Brendan and Laura, do jump in anytime and ask Marc a question or each other. One question I've got for anyone is, there have been many discussions around how you measure performance and many different views on it. But what about potential? What do you guys think about that? And just to chip in there first, Marc, you and I have obviously been working on a framework where which we're going to show everyone later, where we've got a number of questions that we're asking the manager to assess, and you get a sort of combined, it considers 6 factors that then get combined to try and give you some kind of position on a scale. I was just going to ask Brendan and Laura if you've had any discussions about that, whether it caused any arguments. Did you have your sort of calibration meetings where everyone's saying, well, hang on, maybe it's this, maybe it's that?
I think it's safe to say that potential is often in the eye of the beholder. Having, I think, to the work that you're doing around let's define what we mean as potential means you can start to narrow it down, because actually, to the visibility point, even in a calibration meeting, often all the people sitting in the calibration don't know everybody that's being discussed, and they're relying on the team lead or the regional head to have that view. And what I've often seen is that people say, well, I just can't judge potential because I don't see it. So my challenge to companies is always, how do we define potential versus not what you can see? So it doesn't have to be, particularly in these hybrid working days, that someone's next to you and you see them operating, and that nebulous, intangible potential is visible through who they are. You're going to have more rigorous sort of definitions of what potential means. Also, obviously, to challenge and make sure that, from a DEI perspective, you're not allowing the loudest, whitest, usually most male views to come through and look like potential because they're the noisiest in the room. So moving potential from that eye of the beholder, the visibility is probably the biggest challenges.
Brendan?
No, I agree. I think, it's what talent looks like can be quite different for everybody. You don't want the sort of mini-me's to be replicated across the entire sort of business stream. So I think, it is the responsibility of various individuals across what we call our sort of operation functions, so L&D, HR, all across that board, who work very closely with the business, to kind of say, okay, what does talent look like to you, your team? What are you expecting in terms of a high performer, for that next generation of leaders to sort of come through? Because individuals may be very good at what they do, and that's great, but are they, what does the above and beyond kind of look like? How does that sort of manifest itself? Are they living the values of the firm? Do they align to the commercial goals? Are they sort of looking to kind of have the bigger sort of picture in terms of the sort of client delivery and kind of things like that? So I think certainly within our business, it encompasses quite a few different things. And a partner may kind of say, this individual is great, I can really see them being sort of senior manager, director sort of one day. And it's our responsibility as HR professionals, and we challenge them to say, okay, so why is that? Where are they today? Where are those sort of development points? And then from a DER perspective, 100%, it's so important these days, because the traditional sort of accounting practices, sort of white male top tier down, it's taken us years and years to break a lot of those barriers down to kind of funnel through different sort of talent. And especially these days, we're looking to definitely tap into the social mobility angle of our future talent as well. A top kind of partner doesn't necessarily have to come from sort of private education or certain sort of schools and sort of backgrounds. And us as a business, we've really wanted to sort of branch out on that. And I think in the years to come, we'll start to see more and more success stories like that from a variety of backgrounds that come through. But, I think talent, it's a great question. I love the subject because it means something different to absolutely everybody. And I love having those challenging conversations with different people across the business. And I think the more conversations that us as HR professionals can have with the business, they'll come to trust us so that we can help guide them, consider different options, different perspectives and ways of sort of looking at things. But I think having key allies at the top is really important to do that. So somebody who believes in the idea of, the value that DEI can bring, or social mobility. So within our business, our managing partner, Simon, he's particularly passionate about social mobility, and the value it can bring to our sort of business. So I think it's important to have key allies who are not HR that can work with you to work constructively with the business to achieve those goals.
I think that not HR is critical. That would be my biggest piece of advice at any point is, not HR to do it, because actually we often have access to more information. We've often thought about this a lot more. You need allies, but you also need to consider how far on the maturity curve your senior leaders are. And a lot of the time they're going to need a lot more steps to jump to the point that you already know is the right idea before it comes along the way. And it's allies, but also just time.
Yeah. Laura, was there anything that your senior leaders particularly grabbed onto when you were implementing this as the kind of the key thing that they're like, yes, okay, we've got to have that? Or perhaps that came later?
I think it comes later on when you see the benefits. I think that's the thing with when you roll this out somewhere. Often there's initial skepticism and you have to give it a go, and sometimes it's kind of see one, do one, and then they're able to kind of actually understand that flow a little bit. Plus that building of trust is the critical piece that you're demonstrating. You're not going to suddenly come back at them in 6 months and say, will you put these people in the bottom right hand corner, so we're going to lay them off or do something with them. You've got to build that mature conversation that says we're talking talent here, and don't worry, it's not necessarily linked to you losing people when you're so stretched and you've got so much going on. I think the big thing is also just that actually the aha moment when you realize that you've identified someone good, you've given them a stretch opportunity, and look at them fly. Suddenly you've got, that people are on board, their minds are changed, they have to see it in action beyond the exercise itself. For that real sort of, certainly my experience was that senior leaders needed to see it worked, but you've got to get them to do it to see that it works. So that can be a catch-22 sometimes.
Got it. Okay. So sticking with the perspective of the individual, actually, what when it comes to things like development budget, we talked last time we spoke about maybe how do you distribute that perhaps around the people who are in different kind of areas or stages in their growth. Did you ever do any work around that, or was that a conscious thing, or would you tackle people in the kind of extremities more than the people in the middle, perhaps? Yeah, go for it.
I'll jump in and just say that as part of the kind of the research to this, a lot of the official guidance or what you read about in some of the sort of studies and approaches suggests that you spend, the vast majority of your budget on those few people in the top right-hand corner. But actually, through the conversations and discussions, that's not really borne out, and people don't like that approach at all. And this is one of the areas I think where people have a preference to be much more inclusive in their approach to supporting people's development, and sort of spreading that budget around according to the need. So that was what kind of came through in reality from the conversations.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other views on that, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've got a very big L&D budget. Such a highly regulated industry. There's always something new in terms of new legislation or new skills or the way to sort of approach different sort of advice that we need to be taking. So our L&D and training budget has to be evenly distributed across the board. And we actively encourage all of our staff to upskill themselves, both from a technical perspective, but equally, probably a little bit more importantly, from a soft skills perspective as well. So, we don't make a physical product. It's about how we engage with our customers and our clients and the relationship building and, being those sort of key sort of advisors to them and their sort of businesses. So, everybody's got their role to play. Every now and again, I think in terms of probably time spent, is probably spent more with the underperformers more than anything else. But certainly from like a budgetary perspective, we have that sort of inclusive kind of approach to it, because everybody needs it and everybody requires it and everybody gains the benefits of that.
I think I'd reflect as well that actually often the L&D budget stress tests your 9-box because when you go to say, okay, we can see you've said that this person is your growth person, so I assume they're going to go on the next leadership program next, and they go, oh no, it's not them, it's this person over here. And so that holistic element of not just doing this in isolation and realizing the different areas that this can knock onto and kind of, prompting managers in that thinking is really important. And that comes with the maturity curve. But I know Mark and I have definitely had it in the past where you just have managers suddenly completely restacking who they're actually spending their money on. And that can come up again in a future conversation around when you get back to the 9-box to say, well, you actually spent all your money here and that's not reflected in what we're seeing in the 9-box. So let's revisit it from a practical perspective.
Yeah, and our flagship sort of talent management program within Menzies is our career sponsorship program, and it's designed around individuals in the firm sort of having a sponsor, so somebody who's not too close to them in terms of the day-to-day and has that sort of kind of neutral perspective. So what we spend on them is time, and time is an extremely valuable sort of commodity within our sort of business. And it's a little bit different to that sort of mentor, but, there's a lot of sort of crossover, but it's about spending time with the individuals to bring them up, understand where those key development points, and that can be high performers, it can be effective performers as well. And sometimes you can even be individuals that need the help. And they have to apply for the program. We kind of go through the reasons why they're looking to do and then what they're looking to get out of it. And we look to sort of place the right people with them. So I think if you can get those kind of matches, right, in terms of partners and people sort of partnering with individuals across the firm, I think the engagement can skyrocket, performance can uplift itself as well. And that is good for the business, really. I mean, that makes good commercial sense for us, and has done incredibly well. But yes, rather than budget, it's time that is our commodity within that one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, actually, that feeds into a good question here from Sam, which is how do we make sure people aren't just put into boxes, but it turns into quality actions and conversations? So that's what you want, right? You want some action to come out of it so that everyone gets the benefits of this. And if we're saying helping managers to be more objective about how they think about their teams, and that kind of unlocks ideas about how to support that person best, or where they might be interested in moving to, or going what direction to pursue in their career or whatever. Did you put in place anything like that? What happened after the calibration meeting? Basically, that's what I'm curious to know. When perhaps managers would be told that calibrated responses or results or whatever. Brendan, I think you told us already that a manager would then go and talk to that person and talk to them about where you thought they were in the grid. So would that naturally then lead into some sort of actions, or and also any kind of input from the employee themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the 9-box grid is sort of the end point of our appraisal process. So, you're talking about the objectives and, how they align to the values of the firm. And we talked a little about competencies, and we're talking around the talent management 9-box grid. And then we look at the PDP after that. So we sort of ended with the PDP, so it's about looking forward. This is where you are. This is the reasons we are placing you in a particular kind of area right now. But, it's about what you do with the information you've been given, and, what are your aspirations? What are you looking to achieve? And that sort of knock-on effect can lead to different things. So is it further sort of training further sort of development. Our career sponsorship is all about development and bringing that individual along that sort of journey. So it's got a number of different sort of after effects. So it just depends on the conversation, but we aim for it to be a quality conversation rather than just a tick boxing exercise, because, we really do want to invest in our people from that perspective, because, they're all very highly qualified and trained, and they're extremely valuable commodity. So if we can not let them go and retain them and make our business stronger and grow our business, then that's the intention of the business. But it comes down to the individual. The company can't do everything. It has to be a joint effort at the end of the day.
Excellent. Okay, Laura, how about you? Any anecdotes about those sort of post-process conversations?
So all roads with talent and development lead back to manager competency, because often in a bigger organization, managers being asked to communicate something that's been actually discussed at a different level by head of a team or a regional lead, for example, and they've got to carry a message that they may or may not agree with. Now, in a lot of organizations I've worked in, actually 9-box positions were not communicated. Some managers may have taken it upon themselves to do that, but it was actually kept separate. Multiple reasons for that, but one of them was always around trust in the manager to then land the message with the individual, which comes to Brendan's point around you need to spend a lot of time to make sure that those are meaningful and critical conversations. So I would say that anecdotally, a lot of employee experience comes down to managers, and the 9-box experience is no different, really. If you've got a poor manager who can't communicate, then no matter how many tools you use, it's still going to feel rubbish for the employee. So actually, you've got to be confident that your culture is ready for it to be communicated and that your managers have been upskilled sufficiently or can be upskilled alongside to really land the message well. Because actually, no position on 9-box should be a negative, but it can often be perceived as such if it's not landed in the right way.
Yeah.
I think it's important to set that expectation at the start of the exercise as well. And actually the box filling part of it is almost the end of part one of the process, because actually what you do with that information is kind of the important part, and be that whether or not you communicate the exact location on the grid or use that information to then inform conversations with the individual around their development on the job, training sessions, leadership development programs, whatever it might be. But again, it gives you that tool and sort of language it's a vehicle to have the conversation around. So I think that's sort of expectation setting at the start is an important part of it as well. But I've been part of these kind of reviews where, you're sat around a table with 10 or 12 leaders talking about different people and where they should be and so on. And actually in the moment, it could be that, talking about a development need that somebody has, and a leader on the other side of the table says, well, I'm going to have an opportunity, or I've got a project coming up over here where actually I need someone like them to support us with that. So I've seen the dots get connected in real time. It's not even like a follow-up or something that happens weeks afterwards. It can happen in the moment as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think, I think just then we were just getting on to the whole thing about, manager capability. And, whilst we, we've been talking about a process that sounds like a sort of a process that might happen every now and then. Actually, you all mentioned the need for it to be something that's fluid and it's not final and it's not, your positions are not fixed. And, again, it lends itself to the continuous performance management process that we all kind of tend to advocate. Continuous conversations, it shouldn't be a surprise, or once a year thing. And luckily, I think technology helps kind of get away from the old Word documents that almost by necessity ended up being kind of once a year because it was just such a hassle.
Yes, I just want to say a massive thank you to our panelists today. It was really, really interesting to hear your thoughts and your expertise. And as we mentioned, we will be sharing the contact details post this webinar. We'll be sending a recording, our sort of captured insights from this, and also, we will absolutely distribute any sort of email addresses and so forth, so you can continue the conversation and ask any further questions that you may have. But a massive thank you. You can also actually, in the app section in Livestorm, you can click apps and links to download the fabulous guides Marc has written on the subjects. So please feel free to download those too. Also, unfortunately, this event was meant to be in person, but TfL had different plans. But we are looking to have our in-person event on the 20th of March, 2025, at the Penthouse, the Meunier Chocolate Factory near London Bridge. We do have a save the date registration page, which again, we can share with you and will share with you in the next couple of days. So please do sign up, as we would love to see you all, speak about a different topic and share a glass of wine with you. But again, thank you so much all for joining us. Do speak with us if you would like to use any of the product that Alex showed to you recently. And yeah, it's been great. And we hope to see you at another event very, very soon.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Marc. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you all.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.